So welcome and thank you for taking some time out of your day, and I really hope it's going to be useful for you to talk about this topic, because we're going to be talking about resilience, and particularly resilience as a woman, as it is International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day. I hope it's gone well. Or just like any other day, really. International Women's Day out there. So what we're going to be looking at is what makes people resilient and how can we up our resilience. I don't know how you're feeling about your resilience. Has it been tested a little bit over the last couple of years? And then unfortunately, just when we thought things were getting better, then we have the awful situation in Russia, which I know is really affecting a lot of people and certainly affecting us over here as well. So I'm going to be talking about resilience, how it affects us, what we can do, and looking at some techniques for improving our resilience. So let me show you some slides. How's that?
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So you can see my slides. And as I said, please do ask questions. You know, it said it was recording. Can you still see that it's recording on yours?
Yeah, it says recording in the top left.
Okay, just checking that it is recording. Okay, so let's get going. My name's Gillian Jones-Williams and I'm the Managing Director of Merge. I've actually been working with ESI for quite a few years now. We run the Rise Women's Development Programme there, and I've been working with Caroline, your HR people, for quite a long time, coaching some of your leaders there as well. And for me, this is such an important topic, because if we want to be successful as women, there are things which I think women do which are different to men, which affect their resilience. Would you agree, potentially, that women overthink a little bit? Anybody here an overthinker? Yeah? Or worry a little bit? Yeah, can get more anxious. Perhaps we get feedback and the feedback affects us. And that can affect how we feel. So I think it's really important that we have as many techniques as we can to help us to feel more confident and to deal with situations. So that's what this afternoon is going to be about. We're going to be talking about our brain a bit, actually, and what can we do with our brain to help us to cope with the little voices in our head which sometimes get in the way of us being resilient. Would you agree? Do you all have a voice in your head? Okay, if you think you don't, that was a voice in your head which was just saying, no, I don't have one. We all have a little voice in our head, and that voice can either be helpful or it can be destructive. And a lot of our resilience depends upon the conversations that we're having in our heads there. So we'll be looking a little bit about stress, how we can manage what I call your state. I don't know whether you know this, but you are always in a state. Did you know that? From the minute we wake up to the minute we go to bed, we're in a state, and that state changes quite regularly. And also how we can look at feeling more confident, because when we're confident, we're ultimately more resilient. And then I'm just going to take you through a model which looks at some other things we can do with our lifestyle, really, which will help us to be more resilient. And certainly I come from a place of really understanding the need to be resilient. So I'll just give you one example of that. I've run my business for 25 years. And in March 2020, it feels very real to me at the moment as we come up to March the 23rd. We were a face-to-face training company. I lost everything. So from having a business which was absolutely thriving, nobody was doing any face-to-face training. So you can imagine we lost everything. And so I had to spend the summer of the first part of the pandemic trying to rebuild the business, change things and work. So I had to pull on all of the techniques that we're talking about to be able to succeed. And thankfully we did, and we're in a good place now. But it was a really, really tough period there. I know everybody will have had their own experience as well through lockdown, so it's difficult. But let's start. As we haven't got so many of you, we won't put you into a group to start with. But if you'd like to unmute and talk to me. So what sort of challenges are you having as women that mean that you need to be extra resilient? Because you're in quite a male-dominated world in some ways, aren't you there? So what sort of challenges do you have? It's very, very true. And all of those things knock our confidence, because if we really want to be great at what we do, we have to feel very relaxed. Would you agree? If you think about when you do your best work, it's when you're in your flow, it's when you're relaxed, you know that the people around you trust you, recognize you can do something, you know that you're clear on what you're trying to achieve, and you know you're not under undue pressure. And in order to do that, as I said, you need to be in an environment which is free of some of those things. And it's a big debate today, break the bias, isn't it, about how do we really overcome this? I was just doing a round table just earlier on, and one of the things which I said to them that I heard from somebody was a woman who joined a business when she was very young and found that they kept making very sexist jokes. And she said when she first joined, she was so young and naive, she didn't understand. So she said, "Could you explain that to me, please?" And she said the embarrassment that the person found when they were trying to explain the punchline meant that she thought, I've got a great technique here. So every time somebody said something sexist or risky or something like that, she would very innocently say to them, "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you explain that, please?" And we've just been having a debate about, so what do you do in the face of persistent behaviour like this? Because it's exhausting having to continuously do it. But if we don't continuously do it, it's a bit like, for those of you who have got children or have no children around, if every time somebody does something, we don't say, that's not the way to do it, please do it this way, when will it ever stop? So I think our resilience and being able to continue is really important. Some good discussions there, thank you. We will cut that out, and so I'll now start from doing a slide here to make it quite clear. One of the things which really affects us, I think, is uncertainty and how it causes stress. Now, do you all know how you feel when you're stressed, your bodily feelings when you're stressed? Things like kind of just your stomach doesn't feel quite right, does it, there? And you're a bit agitated or a bit hot or a bit clammy or curling up or something like that. And a lot of these come from uncertainty. And what happens is when we're in a time of uncertainty, which we have been for the last 2 years and we now are again, we have this action dilemma. We're thinking, what can I actually do about this? Our brains want to take some action, but it doesn't know what to do. Then we get the lack of feeling in control. And as human beings, we have an urge to be in control of things. And when control is taken away from us, I'm sure we've all experienced that, that can make it very, very stressful. And that can lead to falsely high anticipation. We're always hoping that things are going to get better. So we keep getting disappointed. This looks like it's hitting home with you, Sasha, there. Yeah. And that means that our brains then go on increased alertness. It's now searching for more and more threats so that it can avoid the threat by worrying. And we think, okay, well, if I worry a bit more, if I go through the what if scenarios, or shall we do this or shall we do that, it will be better, which of course it isn't better. That means we start searching for knowledge, and we Google and we look for things, which makes it even worse. And I say, my phone's just lit up and said, how can I help? Because I said Google. And that leads to higher levels of nervousness. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Those type of reactions to stress. So what we have to do is to think about what is going on in our brain. And I don't know how much work you ever looked at or thought about doing with the brain, but the brain is a very, very powerful tool there. And what it does is it helps us in many different ways to be able to think our way into situations and out of our situations. Now, I mentioned earlier about you being in a state, and you are in a state, but do you realise how much you create your own states? Let that settle with you for a second, because we often use the words, they made me so angry. He made me really anxious. He made me very stressed. Okay. And what I'm suggesting to you is that your brain is creating this, and you are choosing to allow yourself to choose that. What do you think about that? Because that's quite a big statement, isn't it? I'm saying that nobody does this to you. Nobody makes you feel stressed, that we do it to ourselves. Bit of stunned silence there. I mean, just think back over how you have felt and the behaviours that you've used over the last few months, and think about, did I choose to behave that way? Did I choose to feel that way? Or did I think that somebody had taken my choice away from me? We can choose, but sometimes we don't because it's hard. Let me explain it to you in a different way, and this is from some work by Stephen Covey. We cannot stop a stimulus hitting us, okay? Stimulus comes, here's my stimulus, it's going to be this side of my head. Something happens, I pick up an email, I have a call, something happens, I get some feedback I don't like. I get that feeling there. And over here is my response. But there is a gap in the middle. And that gap in the middle is where I decide. So I can choose that, providing I instruct my brain to make the right choice. Okay? Because I can say, I feel angry. And what the brain does, it does a derivative search to find the state of angry. Have you ever had that? Have you ever said to yourself, I mustn't cry? And then suddenly your bottom lip starts quivering and the crying starts because your brain has heard the word cry. The brain doesn't process negatives very well. So when you start asking your brain for a state, if you say, I want to be calm, I'm okay, I can do this, it happens. Has anyone had experiences of that where they have programmed their brain to do it in the right way? The bang is the stimulus and you think, oh my God, what's happened? So the choice then is going to be, do I run around panicking and shouting, what on earth has happened? Or do I calmly walk over and say, is everybody okay? What's been going on? That's the choice that we make. And you're absolutely right. It's that freedom to choose. But there is something called a 90-second rule. And that 90-second rule says that once a state has descended on you, it's a bit like Mission Impossible. You have 90 seconds to choose whether or not to accept it. So you can imagine, here I am, I'm going about my day, I'm feeling okay, I'm feeling nice and calm, and then suddenly somebody says something, and I think, how dare you say that? That's going to be what happens. And then I have 90 seconds to say, but do you know what? I'm not going to let that affect me because I need to be like this now, and I need to be strong, or I need to be calm. But if for 90 seconds I sat there thinking, how dare, I am so angry, I'm going to do that, it will become a stuck state. And that's when it becomes difficult for us to get ourselves out of it. Is that making any sense? Now then, let's add another bit to it. I'll stop my slides for a second because that was a really good point that was brought up. When your heart starts pumping and you've got adrenaline going through you, it's really very, very difficult to manage it. Have you all been in a situation whereby you've walked away from an interaction and thought, why did I say that? Mm-hmm. Or why didn't I say that? Have you all had that experience? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I want to do is I want to explain how this happens and why your brain wasn't capable in that moment of being able to give you the resilience that you need. Okay. In order to do that, I need to take you back to our primitive days. And in our primitive days, we were programmed simply to do one of two things, weren't we? Which were fight
or flight.
Absolutely. That's all that we knew. We were programmed to, our brain, trained brain was programmed to look for threat. And when it saw it, when we came out of our cave, we saw a stone and we'd go and hit it for a while until we learned, okay, that's not a threat. I'm okay with this. So when we were faced with a big bear, let's say, for example, we didn't stop and think about it and think, how hungry does that bear look? That's 650 pounds. We didn't do that, did we? We just either attacked it or we ran away from it. Now, of course, in modern day, we're not facing bears, but we are facing other things which can cause threats. And what dinosaurs maybe, but what the brain does is that when it's in threat mode and it sees something which it thinks is going to worry you, it sends adrenaline to the body. So have a think about this. The adrenaline process goes like this. First of all, it shuts down the digestive system. Because if you're going to fight a bear, you don't need a snack, right? Okay, so that's the first thing that happens. Then, and unfortunately, this is why we know before presentations why we want to keep running to the ladies, isn't it? Because the digestive system is sort of making you as light as possible for flight. Then what it does is it switches on the cooling glands, and that's the sweating that we experience. And then it starts to pump the blood fast around the body to the organs that need it most, which is obviously the heart and the lungs and the limbs. Can you imagine, with all this activity going on down there, what's happening up here? No blood to the brain. So you can't think and feel at the same time. If you have allowed yourself to get into feelings mode, whilst that adrenaline is surging through you, it's not helping you hear. Does that ring any bells with people? It's a bit like a presentation, isn't it? Do you all love doing presentations? Or is there anyone here who gets a little nervy by them? So here we are, we're sitting there waiting for our presentation, and it's going to be my turn next. Do you know that feeling? They're going to announce me next. And then you do the worst thing you can possibly do, which is to read your notes. Because if you start reading your notes 2 minutes before you do a presentation, like, what did I mean by that? What was that all about? You kind of have to trust your unconscious brain. So you're then sitting there and the brain goes, oh, you're really in trouble. Let me give you another shot of adrenaline. Now, once adrenaline gets into your system, it takes 20 minutes to get out. So if you have had 3 shots of adrenaline, if you're sitting there going, oh, I feel so nervous. Oh, nervous, says the brain. Let's give you some more adrenaline. Before you know it, you're going to be sick in a bucket soon. You've had so much. So the key to being able to choose behaviour and really work on that resilience is to be able to recognise when you've had a shot of adrenaline and to stop any more coming, so that the blood will rush back to your head. And I bet you've had that experience too. Have you taken a phone call and somebody's told you something's happening? You went, what? I don't know what to do. And then when you suddenly allowed yourself to know, calm down, and you suddenly go, right, okay, this is what we're going to do. And you know. So that might be all very interesting, but how do you do that? What could you do to fool the brain that there's no bear to fight? Because that's the trick, isn't it? Because then it'll stop sending adrenaline. What sort of techniques could you employ?
Maybe self-reassurance.
Self-reassurance, yeah, you could tell yourself, I'm calm. Again, you're instructing the brain there. Mira, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say like self-affirmations and like breathing techniques.
I am completely in control. Anybody go skiing? I go skiing. I've just come back from skiing last week. And when I get on a slope, which I'm not very good on, which is probably most of them, I spend most of it going down there going, I'm really good at this. I'm absolutely fine. Because I know as soon as the adrenaline fits, I'm going to fall over there. What else can you do to fool the brain that there is no bear to fight?
Along a similar lines to that, just breathing.
Absolutely. We don't do yoga breaths in front of bears, do we? So if you're doing a really good deep in and out, your brain says, I must be okay. You know, you might want to count the pictures in the room or ask a question. We don't ask bears questions. So that's the first thing in terms of being able to choose the behaviour you want. And if we want to choose to be resilient, if we want to choose to be strong, and I know that you all know that there will have been situations where you've done that, haven't you? When in hindsight, you've looked back and thought, how was I so strong at that moment? But you probably told yourself, I need to do that. So a lot of resilience comes from managing the mind, managing the brain, and always asking and choosing the behaviour that you want. So when I talk about resilience, it's quite interesting because sometimes people talk about we need to bounce back. But my view of resilience is that we need to bounce in a forward trajectory. Because if we don't, then we might just be bouncing back to where we were, where potentially we crashed and burned. And we're always going to have situations which floor us. Would you agree? Situations which really hit us and we think, I don't know how I'm going to come out of this. I don't know how I'm going to get over this. I don't know how it's going to be better. But there is a technique you can think of. We call it 5 5s. When something happens, stop and think, will this matter in 5 minutes? Will it matter in 5 hours? Will it matter in 5 days? Will it matter in 5 weeks? And will it matter in 5 months? And for the majority of things, given a day or so, it won't matter, will it? We missed a deadline at the time. We thought it was the most dreadful thing ever. But actually 2 days later, nobody's remembered it. It doesn't matter. Or I didn't get the job that I wanted. But then 5 weeks later, maybe I get offered something else. So being able to very calmly assess that and be resilient is what it's really all about. And so that comes down to what we're talking about here, which is called the systemic model. And what it tells us is the way that we process information, the way that we think, creates our state, which is how we feel. And that state creates our behaviour and what we do. And it happens all the time. Let me give you a silly example from home, and then you can think about work examples. You're driving home, you're in a good mood because you're going out for the night, okay? You picture that, I'm driving home, nice on time, and I'm thinking, I know I'm going to wear that little black dress. Where is that little black dress? Oh, my sister borrowed it. Oh, and she didn't bring it back. In fact, she never brings anything back, does she? She's always doing that. She never thinks about me. So the state that I've created now means that when I drop off at my sister's house on the way home to pick up the dress, I'm literally banging on the door going, dress! And she's like, well, hello, nice to see you too. Have you ever done that? Let a chain of thought run out. We do it at work then, don't we? We have a meeting with somebody and it's not a good meeting, or perhaps we do feel a bit patronised or undermined or intimidated in that meeting. And then we have to meet again. Has anybody actually looked in their diary and found their stomach turn over when they've seen an event coming up or a meeting? Yeah. Because what happens then, if we look at this model, my internal processing is, oh my goodness, I've got that meeting, I'm going to be up against a wall, I bet they're going to say that, and then they're going to do this, and this is going to happen. So the state I'm creating is either going to be one of nervousness or defensiveness, and the behaviour that they see might impact on the result that you get. But perhaps if I process it differently, and I'm saying to myself, okay, it's all going to be fine. I'm well prepared. It will be a good meeting. We'll get a result. I sometimes use the term when things are going horribly wrong in a meeting. It's all working out perfectly. I just say it to myself in my head. But what we can't do is cheat the brain. So it's no good you saying to yourself, I'm all good, I'm fine. And then if Emma says to you, how do you feel about the meeting? You go, oh, I'm really nervous. Then we've confused the brain. It's got to choose whether it's nervous or whether it's fine. We have to say it to everybody. So when somebody says to you the night before, how are you feeling about that meeting? You say, yeah, good, I'm all prepared, I'm ready, I'm fine. If they say, oh, really? Because it could be quite different, it'll be fine. So the way that we represent that in our brains is really important. Can anyone else think of situations where maybe the way that they think doesn't help them to have the state that they need in a situation? So what I'm suggesting to you here is that you have what I call a to-do list every day. Yeah? Do you all have to-do lists? Mm-hmm. We love a to-do list, don't we? What's the best part of a to-do list? Rewriting it. Ticking it off. Not like that. This is your to-be list. What about in the morning, if you woke up and you said, what have I got going on today? What do I need to be today? And then asking your brain to give you that. And the more that you do this, the quicker your brain will respond to that and say, I'll do that. If you say to yourself, I feel really tired, I guarantee you'll start yawning in the next 2 minutes. But if you say, I'm energized and I'm up for this, it changes everything. Don't know if that helps anybody there. So we're really talking about, to be resilient, we need to be able to reframe these. And here are a few examples. Sometimes we spend so long in the problem frame talking about what's going on, who's involved, how bad it can be, how bad it can get. And this is where we overthink and we catastrophize. When if we then start thinking, okay, what do I want? What could I do about this? And it's almost like that circle of concern and influence you've probably seen before. And that is about If I worry too much about things which concern me, but I can't actually do anything about them, then it really is going to get me into a dreadful state. Like you all, I'm sure, I'm hugely concerned about Ukraine and Russia. And if I think about it too much, I really could do that. So I'm trying to focus on, well, what can I do? What small things can I do? Can we fundraise? Can we offer things? Can I help? And if I can't, I'm having to tell myself to not think about that until I need to think about it. So we can reframe things. And so we start to look at our language. So if we say, I doubt that we can do this, we think, okay, what can we do immediately? What step can we take? And also, if we're always thinking about negative feelings and talking about where we get frustrated, well, what could we enjoy about it? So it's just trying to flip some of those words there. But it's also about changing beliefs. Now, here is an exercise that I often do with people to help them to look at beliefs which are holding them back. And the fact is, you know, resilience and confidence go hand in hand, and they often start with a limiting belief. Do you know what I mean by limiting belief? Can anyone suggest that? I'm not saying you have to tell me what yours is, but what could a limiting belief be?
Something along the lines of women are never promoted to that role.
Yeah,
so
women, that's a really good, yeah, you know, women will never get to that role. I don't deserve a seat at this table. My opinions are not as valuable as everyone else is more intelligent than me. I am no good at presenting. And when we start thinking about these, we have a lot of beliefs going on in our head. And so what I like to do is to get people to think about those beliefs. And when you get these slides later, maybe you could take one of your own and think about it and think, what is that belief that you hold? And where's it come from? And how does it help you? So if you are sitting there thinking, I'm not a good mother, I'm not good at this, I'm not very good at this. How does it help you? Where does it come from? Has somebody put that in your head? Have you got some evidence about it? I would probably suggest that you put it there, which is what you get to. And does it really serve you? But most importantly, to start thinking about, what are the consequences of me continuing to believe this thing? And if I continue to believe I don't deserve my seat at the table, or I'm not good at negotiating, or I'm not good at this, then it could have impacts further on. And then think about how you can change it and say, okay, what would you rather believe? Maybe I'd rather believe I am a good presenter. I am a good presenter. I deserve this job. You know, I've worked for it. I've got all the knowledge and confidence. And then think about, how would things improve if you believe that? And I bet you'd say, well, it'd be so much better because I'd just get on with it, wouldn't I? How might they worsen if you thought this? Well, they wouldn't really. And then I would ask you the big question. There's only one answer, and you know the answer to this. What would stop you from adopting the new belief? And what would be the answer to that? There's only one answer, isn't there?
Self-doubt.
Yeah, you know, again, it comes back to you choose, don't you? You can choose to have negative beliefs about yourself, or you can choose to believe that you're good. And the more that you work on these things, the more resilient you will become. So it's about this. It's about choice. It's about practice and competence and positive affirmations. I know people hear about positive affirmations and say them and put them, things like that. I'm not going overboard on it. I'm just saying, would you speak to other people the way that you spoke to yourself in your head? Would you say the things you say about yourself to other people? No. The answer is probably no, isn't it? I can see Emma's shaking her hand. I wouldn't say to them, oh, you look fat today, don't you? Yeah. Oh, that contribution you made was rubbish. Why did you say that? You just wouldn't say that to anybody. And yet we consistently allow ourselves. So I have a little bit of a model which is called catch it, check it, change it. And in terms of being resilient, it's brilliant. At any moment in any day, you stop and you think, how am I feeling? And is how I'm feeling now useful for what I'm about to achieve? It might be that you want to be really productive, but is that what I need? So catch it, check it, and if it's not, change it. I can change it right now. So if I'm not feeling particularly productive, if I'm feeling a little bit all over the place, perhaps I need to go and walk around the office or walk around the block for 5 minutes and tell myself, and when I go back in, I will pick up the first thing and I will focus on that until it's done. I think that's a bit of a personal one with me doing that. So there's also something about being resilient, I think, about being very, very grateful. And I know a lot of people nowadays do gratitude journals, but I think it's really helpful, isn't it, to think about things. Nowadays, that's all I can think about. When people talk to me about little problems and trivia, I think, well, you're not sleeping, you know, in an underground station at the moment, are you? And you haven't lost all of your house and things like that. So it is about perspective. Because of the recording, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to also talk through a couple of other strategies. Then I'm going to give you some time to talk in a couple of groups about which you could use. So there's lots I could say about this model here, but this is about really managing our mental health. And when our mental health is good, our resilience is really strong. And it consists of these 5 things here. So I'm just going to whip through them. Some of them you will know about, some of them will be a reminder about, and others might be new to you. So when we talk about physical well-being, you've heard it all before, haven't you? Sleep well, eat well, exercise well, and you will feel great. But let's just briefly stop on some of the science. Did you know that when you sleep, your brain cleans itself? Did you know that? It goes through a process of using enzymes to clean your neurons. That process takes 8 hours, which is why so many young mums get brain fog, or women going through the menopause get it because they're not getting enough sleep. So it really is more important that we know if you want to be performing well and sharp and your brain to feel good, the sleep is really important. The staying active and the walking, my goodness, I'm not saying you should go and join a gym or anything like that, but being able to walk is one of the best things for your brains. I've been really doing it over the last 4 weeks, doing 10,000 steps in the podcast, and it's amazing the clarity I've had. Then I really hate to tell you about this one because you won't like me at all for it, but I've been doing a lot of work lately on my own nutrition, and I've been doing quite a lot of tests on it, and I've been working with hormonal specialists. And the worst thing that we can do is eat processed food. Processed food fogs up our brain, and that means any sugars at all. I don't know if anyone's ever looked at the research on that and the impact that processed food has on your brains and how you feel. It's not just how it affects the rest of our bodies. So the cleaner that you eat, the more likely you are to have productive thoughts and to feel better. And I recognise this. I did it for about 6 months last year. And then over Christmas, when we locked down again, I got miserable and I thought, I'm just going to eat mince pies for 5 days. And I couldn't believe the difference it had in my mood as well. A couple of other things. Support networks. Sometimes people think that very resilient people are very independent, but they're not. They make really good use of their support networks. So if you're not feeling too great or your resilience is low, some people kind of think, I think I'll just lock myself away and I won't talk to people, but it's really, really important. And as I said, managing your brain and remembering that the brain is the engine and you're the driver. It's not the other way around. So you need to start telling it what you want it to do. And remember that your focus does determine your reality. And so some of the things we think about is whatever we think we're right. Perhaps you had parents who told you that, but it's true. And it's also about the perspective that we get, isn't it? And what importance we put on things. And some people are very, very good at taking a step back and taking some perspective and say, okay, it's only that. I once worked with the managing director. I was coaching him of quite a big business making biscuits. I won't mention which one it was for confidentiality reasons. And can you imagine the sort of stress the managing director there was under? Chocolate all over the place, production lines running out, supermarkets on his backs, deliveries. But he never ever seemed stressed. And I said to him one day, how do you manage that? And he said, Gillian, at the end of the day, it's only biscuits. And I thought, actually, it's so true, isn't it? We get ourselves into a state about lots of different things there. So it's about perceptions, it's about how we perceive things, and it's also about our priorities and the way that we look at things. And sometimes we put undue pressure on ourselves. And that pressure is about thinking that we must do something, we should do something. And if you were to change those words around, I have to phone my parents, you change it to, I would like to, I'm looking forward to, I want to, I choose to. That would make a difference. Okay, time is really running away with us, but I'd like you to have a few minutes in a breakout room where you can perhaps talk about what you have heard so far, and if any of this is going to help you. Okay, we are getting towards the end of time. So a quick summary here, as we've talked about, get some control. That's what resilience is all about. And learn some lessons. That's that growth mindset, really, isn't it? I sometimes say life is just a test. Would you agree? Life is a test some days, and whether you pass it or fail it, it's going to give you another test tomorrow. So don't worry too much about it. Just see what you can learn and take forward. Manage that concern and influence, and really think about your relationships and how people around you can help. You do need to do things that make you happy and look after yourself, and that's part of the managing yourself and looking after yourself. Have a vision for yourself and just think about your health and how that can impact. But the most important thing is to believe in yourself. It is all in the mind, and don't lose your sense of humour, because sometimes things do get a bit heavy. We lose our sense of humour, don't we? And it's really important. But overall, I think the message that's coming through is to be resilient and successful. It's about optimism. And as Winston Churchill once said, I am an optimist. I don't see much point in being anything else, which I thought was a good thing. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and for having a whistle-stop tour through this. And I hope it sets you up in a good way for the rest of the week.
Thank you,
so
Gillian.
much.
Thank you, Gillian.
Okay then, bye.